on, you guessed it, www.revolution.radio, where it's more than just radio. So jump into the chat room if you can. This is show number 361.
160 and 300, which of course means they're getting close to the 8th year.
we sure are. It's on air. The station is, not the 8th year. On the line, I stole Mickey's. Far out. I can't talk today. I stole Mickey's line. And on your smart device, so grab an app to listen from anywhere or listen at home on a Grace tabletop digital radio. If you missed Solaris' show, she had Cassandra Van Zandt on, and they were talking about UFOs and spirituality, which is an awesome pair of topics, to be honest. You know, and that question comes up a lot about people's beliefs. How spiritual do you feel? Imagine if we were one with the universe, you know, and there was, and, you know, we'd signed, I love the bumper. There's a bumper at the top of the hour, and it talks about us joining the prestigious, you know, Galactic Federation. I just imagine how that would make us feel for about 5 minutes until the 24-hour news cycle took back over again. But anyway, if you don't know who Solaris is, and you've only ever heard us do this intro, sign up to the archives at freedomslips.com, and you'll have access to her archives, and you can listen to her shows, not just her shows, our shows, but everybody's shows. All the hosts are represented right there in the archives. And you can download the file. It's on MP3 and you can listen in your own time, which is the thing that people do these days. I don't know about you, Mickey, but I do it. That's something for
yes,
you.
Yes, yes.
That's going to get taken out of context, isn't it? I don't know about you, Mickey, but I do it. There you go. There's a grab for you. Look, it only costs $5.95 for access to the archives, and you need to get in there and understand who she is, because she not only is a great guest, she has great guests. She has a whole backstory which is truly amazing, and I didn't know such a thing until we interviewed her and found out what it was that has got Solaris got her voice out there, because when you understand where she's coming from and her background, oh boy. But I'll let her tell you that story. Meckie and I, because we come from Australia, well, we live in Australia, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. Now, I'm going to say to you, wherever you are, this planet has been inhabited by an intelligent species, and we're not the first. And
hang on. You're saying we're intelligent, but keep going.
Oh, I knew you'd catch me out on that one. I baited you, that one. That's a clickbait right there. The people who have looked after this, you know, I was thinking about this today, Meckie. I was thinking about this, and I thought to myself, gee, we've really plundered this planet in at least the last 200 years. Before then, we really didn't know what we were doing. We were just Lord of the Flies, right? On a global scale, that's what we were. Now, oh my goodness, you can't go anywhere without seeing evidence of how poorly we've mismanaged this planet and its resources. Thinking about
no, I think we've mismanaged it really well. We've done a really good job in mismanaging it.
Wow, you're going to be on my back all show. I've had a double V today.
I know, right?
Yeah, I've had a double V, and my brain's all over the place. So look, bear with me. It's like the spider with too much caffeine. So I acknowledge the people who have been custodians of the land where I live, and I'm not talking about the whole of Australia. I'm talking about regionally, and specifically exactly the people that looked after the land where I live. And they're the Darganyung people. And Meckie, who are the people from whence you come?
From whence I hail, in my neck of the woods, in my little corner of the world, it is the Daruk people. And yes, thank you to the traditional custodians.
And we pay our respects to elders past, present, and future, because the people in the future may listen, may have an inkling, Mackie, to find out what it was that turned our wheels. And if they do, and they happen upon this, we do respect you as well. Pay our respects to you. And let us remember that beneath our houses, and everything we've built, and everything we've dug up, and everything we've done to this planet, there are lands in which have had stories for passed down in generations for at least 240,000 generations. Mackie.
You're wearing out. That's my name, but you're wearing it out.
That's going to be a long 2 hours, isn't it? So listen, to be honest, it's been yet another tumultuous week in the news cycles.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And has we've seen some, 90% humidity days. We've had some massive storms that have come through with hail. It's been hail and storm damage. We've got almost a third of Queensland is underwater. And did you know there's I found this out today, a derailed train stuck in the floodwaters. You saw that one?
But it was, to be clear though, it was the flood that derailed it. A train actually came off I think people always underestimate or misunderstand the magnitude of the floodwaters here. We're talking about an inland sea which moved with immense pressure. The water pressure was immense, and in some areas there was a meter of rainfall. One meter of rainfall. I don't know. That's like it's like
that's 3 feet. 3 feet. 36 inches. Yeah.
That's a lot of water. It's a lot of water. Okay, just to be very clear. And this area of Australia, that's been flooded now, had been in a drought for years. And when the rains first came, people thought, "Oh yes, hallelujah!" Right? There's the rain, which soon turned into drought.
Stop the rain!
Flood.
Won't someone please stop the rain?
Turn off the water. And there are now crocodiles. Crocodiles
snakes.
Swimming. Yes, and snakes, of course, are swimming through Townsville streets and such. Quite unprecedented. See, this is sorry. What? Then I throw it back to you. But everybody's talking all the time about 100-year flood, once in a lifetime events, blah blah blah. Now I've had like 50 once in a lifetime events in the last 10 years, at least 50 once in a lifetime events since records began, and I hear it almost every time, Dave. I turn on the news. I hear, it's a 100-year flood, or it's a once in a lifetime event, or it's the biggest, hottest, largest, coldest, most rainfall since records began, whatever it might be, right? So that should tell us something. So
we've currently got the extremes of the extremes. That's what we're living in right now. The extreme of extremes. So the equivalent of having all of the stupid people on an island, and you're the king of the stupid people because you're the most stupid. What we're seeing right now, it is like that joke. That's a really funny joke to me, right? If you're trying to insult someone, that's a way to do it. And it's not going at you, Mackie. I'm just saying, this thing. I had to defend myself. This thing right now, the thing that we call climate, is just. It may as well just be a chocolate wheel with items around the outside, and what are we going to have today? We'll just spin that. Oh, look, it's going to snow. Have you seen the ghost apples, Mackie?
No, I have not.
Right, so what happens is the not just frost on the apples, but a thick layer of ice forms around the apple on the tree. And then what happens is the actual apple itself ferments and then leaks out and is no longer inside this shell of ice.
Wow.
And all that's left hanging on the tree is a shell of ice, and there's no apple left in it. It's so amazing. But I'm in awe of some of the things that can occur, right? But I have to say that this land of climate extremes is so crazy. Our Australian, our very national anthem's words say that it's it's got droughts and flooding rains. Like that's in our own national anthem. So everyone goes, oh, well, it just happens all the time. It's just what we're supposed to be used to. Well, that's good. That's good. But you already mentioned, Mickey, my esteemed co-host, you said that, we're hitting records. We're getting record this, record that, 1 in 100 years, once in a lifetime events. How come we're getting them more than once a year? We're getting them every time there's something new. And they're talking about, the hurricanes need to be notched up another number. It has to add a 6 to the scale because now they're bigger than they've been before. The largest, fastest tornado that's ever happened in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking some big numbers and big things.
Yeah.
It's the coldest there and the driest there, and it's the wettest here, and it's the hottest. Crazy.
It is. I don't know if everybody followed the news this week or not, but there's something that was very troubling was discussed, and the week before as well. I'll just quickly mention it again. The scientists all across the board have now said that within the next 5 years, we can reach the critical 1.5 degree temperature increase, average globally. Like within the next 5 years, we could be there. Initially they said, we had 20 years, 30 years, or whatever it might be before that would happen, and we have plenty of time to avert this particular milestone. Now, it just so happens that at 1.5 degrees, a lot of unpleasant things are going to start happening. What the scientists, and I said this before, and I will say it again, what the scientists were modeling, right, was based on the best data they had with the best machines they had. Unfortunately, it's not good enough. What we have is not good enough to actually model what happens in the real world. So we were out by decades when it came to this 1.5 degrees. Decades, right? Which is insane. Now, think about this for a second, right? It's 1.5 degrees, and they say at that point we're going to see some major activity around the climate change discussion and actual, I guess, the reality of it, right? We can see waters rising, ice melting, we can see a whole bunch of extreme weather, even more extreme than we've had. And it's this magic 1.5 degrees, right, on average, across the globe, that will trigger it. After that, as far as I'm concerned, all bets are off. All bets are off. No idea what will happen. I have no idea what's going to happen after that, Dave, because the problem is it's just too crazy.
Do you know what I predicted when I was back in school? It's almost 40 years ago now when I made my prediction that there'll be a storm that rotates around the equatorial region, which will be like the spot on Saturn. It's going to go around and around, and it'll traverse across the thinly laid out bunches of islands around that area and maintain itself perpetually. You see, storms themselves will over water. They start the hurricanes and cyclones, and what they do, they start over warm water, and it's got to be around about 32 degrees Celsius, the water, for it to activate a storm. You need some other conditions for it to begin rotation, but once it starts rotating, that the temperature of the magically temperatured water is a feed, and it feeds to a mass, and that mass becomes greater and greater and greater, and holding that amount of mass and rotating it around a center is where it gets all of its strength. If you can dislodge that mass out of the storm, it ends up with nothing, just a cloud bank. So the temperature of the ocean's surface temperature is getting hotter, and following, and where we live down in Australia, it's coming down the coast, slowly but surely, it's coming down the coast. If we get to the 1.5 degrees, where we could rest assured ourselves that we weren't ever going to have a cyclone hit us, that can no longer be the case when this happens. The extremes, forget it, is a latitude, isn't it? So the latitude of the Capricorn and what's it called, Becky? The two lines.
Cancer.
The Cancer and
Capricorn.
The Tropic of Capricorn and
I
Tropic
talk
Cancer.
about
Thank
the
you.
tropics of Cancer.
Yes.
That's it.
So that distinction is a band across the planet. What it meant when it was designed will stretch towards the poles, widening that band. And this problem that we see right now with this, there's that monsoon, the monsoon trough that descended upon far north Queensland and was there for almost 2 weeks as a spinning mass. We can see that kind of thing going down into the lower latitudes, and that's the real problem. And if you thought you were safe before, you wait till the water's slightly hotter than 32 degrees. If it can get up any higher, we're seeing a real issue, a real issue, and that's what I predicted. So, Meki, I'm still saddened every other day or thereabouts, or maybe weekly at minimum. I see posts coming from climate deniers. I've got friends who don't believe that the climate's changing at all. I think they're just ostriches with their heads in the sand. And it's all cyclical. But if the intensity of the events are increasing,
it is.
I'm not saying it isn't, and I'm not. Remember, I delete the cause often. I'm not worried about cause. I'm just saying that lovely little paradise we lived in the early 1900s, the paradise of there not being so many of these things, and we had pretty much regular farming, except for, and don't talk to me about the Dust Bowl in the US. I know what caused that, and that was the kind of hoe that was being used that tore up all the top layer, and that's what turned that into a Dust Bowl. The main point that I'm making is just strap yourself in and get ready for what's coming.
Can I ask you, Dave, are your friends saying it's cyclical? Is that the argument?
No, they're saying nothing's at all happening. It's all happened before, it's happening again, and it happened when I was 2 or something, and they're denying that there's anything at all going on.
Right. So the truth of the matter is that the climate is ever changing. We know this because we found snap frozen, and I say this again and again, we found snap frozen animals in the Arctic Circle, meaning they were there at some stage when they were not frozen, they're walking around, right? So climate changes very, very, very quickly. And we also know that there are different climate zones across the world by the plant growth that was there. We also know that certain areas of the planet that are today land used to be underwater. There's no big secret there. I mean, in the Eifel, which is a mountain region where I come from, in the Rhineland, in Cologne, if you go into the mountains, which I used to do a lot for school excursions and whatnot, guess what kind of fossils you find? You find marine fossils. And no, there wasn't a whole bunch of people that brought all those marine fossils into the mountains. That didn't happen. They're there, and they're there because that's where they formed millions, I don't know, hundreds of millions or whatever years ago, right? Or not, as the case may be. But the point is, whenever it happened to be, the point is that yes, weather changes all the time. Yes, it gets cold and hot, and that's not the point that we're trying to make here. And you might remember hot days when you were a child. You might remember really cold days, crazy storms, right? You might remember all of that stuff, and that's true. That's not what we're trying to argue here, or what we're trying to make people understand. What we're saying is, and not just us, by the way, a whole bunch of scientists too. These events, right, that used to happen, the freak events, they used to happen, yes, absolutely. No argument. They were called freak events. But when they happen, okay, 3, 4, 5 times in a week, in a month, whatever it might be. And, there again, like we said at the beginning of the show, the one in a 100-year storm happens like 3 times in a week. A 1 in a 100-year flood happens 5 times in a month. Okay, when temperatures come to a mark that was higher than when, since records began, it's the highest since records began. Then we're seeing a shift of not the weather, but the climate. I mean, weather goes up and down. Weather events can be crazy. When these weather events happen, or the crazy ones happen more and more frequently, something else is amiss. Something else is changing. So you can't have you can't have a once in a 100-year storm 5 times in a week.
No, you can't.
It's ludicrous. It's now the weather.
So remember, so there's weather, which is always happening. And this is what they do, Meki. They go, oh, flood. Oh, it's flooded before. And you go, it's hot. And they go, oh, it's been hot before. But it hasn't flooded like this, and it hasn't been hot like this since records began. And my argument to them is just count the severity and the conditions in which this thing occurred are happening more frequently. So the perfect storm of events as a cascade problem where it took one thing to accumulate before the next thing would trigger it, for instance, is occurring more often. I'm not trying to convince you of it. I'm just saying that's the conditions in which these things, the new normal happens. And wherever you live, I don't even care. I don't care. I don't care if it's colder where you live, or it's hotter where you live, or it's drier where you live, or it's wetter where you live, or you're not experiencing this currently. Look around you, others are. And just because it's cold where you live, or just where it's hot where you live, doesn't mean that that's the trend. Because so many people go, oh, it's going to be an ice age in a minute, right? Right, sure. I don't care if there's an ice age where you live, and it's we're burning to death and you can't go outside in the sun anymore, right? Where I live, fine. If you don't like it there, come here. And if I don't like it here, maybe I'll go there. Or maybe there's a halfway point between both of them, because you can't have a heat wave in a glacier, right? Maybe. So, anyway, look, that's what I was talking about. But one of the things, Meki, just besides weather, are firestorms. Mm-hmm. So it's getting hot enough now to support something. And I've watched a recent documentary on a forest in the US which has been burned by fire. And one of the guys who works, one of the forestry commission guys who works there looking after the forest, he's been working on it, 40 years or something, working in this place. And he said that the last fire that came through is unlike all the other fires that have been through that area in the past. He said that this time, as opposed to the former times when the fires had gone through and burnt some of the timber and the grass sprouted pretty much straight away once it was exposed to sunlight, right? But on the first rain, he said, and the whole thing became, a living forest again pretty quickly afterwards. It took a number of years, but it came back. He said this time, even the topsoil burnt, exposing only sand left.
Wow.
All of the organic matter was consumed by the fire. There is no longer any organic matter whatsoever. So nothing.
That had to be hot, dude.
Oh, it was pretty hot, yeah. So in Australia, our plants, we're so fortunate that the trees, well, I suppose it's a double-edged sword, really. Our trees that explode into flames because the oil itself within the tree is also combustible. Yeah, good on you, whoever made that up, right? But these trees, because they've been conditioned so over a long time, probably 240,000 generations, certainly in Australia, they actually germinate because of fire. So their seeds that have fallen off in previous times sit, in the leaf litter They're in that organic material, that organic soil layer, and when the fire comes through, the extreme heat actually germinates them. Yeah, and then they sprout. But not this forest. It was a pine forest, and it's completely gone. It looks like a savanna now. And in fact, if he wasn't the forestry commission guy that lived on that land to take care of it, I would argue that it was never a forest. I go, where's all the trees? If it's a forest, where's the trees? And he goes, well, there used to be trees. And I go, rubbish. Look at it. There's no trees. Not even a tree for as far as you can see. And he goes, yeah, I know, but there used to be trees. When was there trees? What, fossilized trees? He goes, no, like last year. Last year, this whole thing was a forest. You couldn't see 2 feet in front of you, right? Now it's completely gone. It's like the worst case scenario of logging you've ever seen, but with no tracks.
Yeah.
I mean, if one thing comes to mind, Mackie, is that if it became so hot, like over 50 degrees, and we had a fire, we know that the UV light creates O3 from the oxygen. Its energy enables O3 or ozone to get created, reducing the oxygen level. If there was such an event that there was no visible light, but it was all UV, all of the oxygen would be taken up by two things. One, the smouldering mess that was left of our civilization and all of nature, the smouldering mess, because there'd be no oxygen for it to catch a light. We'd all perish because there was no oxygen. And then my join it all together phrase, what's coal? The production of coal underground now is only a result of it being covered up, that forest layer covered up, those massive trees covered up. But they weren't just covered up, otherwise it would just become simple fossils. They were smoldered in an oxygen less or free atmosphere. They couldn't catch fire. Their coal, which was carbon, was simply laid over the top, and then we had a period of glaciation, and that was sort of cemented in, and it lay underground for a long time. So we can pluck that out, just like making coal at home. You have a fireless heat, and it dehydrates it and turns it into carbon. Then you can burn that later, and it burns longer than the original material. Extraordinary. And I always thought maybe there was a massive, a GRB, maybe a gamma ray burst from a local star that cooked one side of the planet, created all this coal. Or it lasted long enough for the whole planet to sort of almost, maybe 3/4 of the planet to turn around during that burst, if it was significant enough. And we lost, 75% of the life on the planet. And only those that, it was still still dawn, and it stopped, and they never knew what happened to the other people everywhere else. I try to run these scenarios and see how it would take. What would it take to have created that coal? And are we coming close to a point where we're doing this to ourselves? These are the questions. Mackie, I'm consumed by these kinds of thoughts and scenarios, and I try with all my might to come up with an answer, because this is what the people of the past did with everything that they wondered about. It's a fair call to wonder the same things. And there's all these unknowns around us. And, we take it for granted. It's like saying to you, Mackie, how does a mobile phone work? And you go, oh, well, it just does. And you go, how does it work? I know you actually know. But other people just assume they know.
The thing is this, I can tell you how it works. However, I can't build one at home.
Yes.
Like if you traveled back in time 200 years, 100 years, 50 years, you would not be able to build the vast majority of the technology that we use today, right? You just wouldn't. And this is really something that I've thought about for a long, long time. Because people always ask, well, if you do these archaeological digs, where's the computer, where's the laptop, where's the mobile phone, da 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 da. And the truth is, sorry, I'm going in a completely different direction, right? but the truth is that technology would have gone a very different way to what we have today, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago. So technology might have been invented very differently, and it might look very different. There's some schools of thought that say that the stones themselves were technological entities, like the stones in Stonehenge, for example. They're very strange stones, but there are other stones around the world which display very strange properties, very strange frequencies. Some people have very lucid dreams when they're there, right? So there's some very strange stuff happening in the world, and the answer is we have found mobile phones and tablet computers in archaeological contexts, in ancient sites. I'm just talking the mechanism of Antikythera, for example, right? That is completely unprecedented. The batteries of Baghdad, right? Unprecedented. So we know that we have lost a lot of technology in the time that we've been here, and that others have been here as well. So while some of us might know how the tech works, to build it all, if you don't have the things that you need to build it, because if you went 50 years back into the past, you wouldn't have the tools and the materials to build the tools and the materials you need to build a mobile phone, right? So you just couldn't do it. It couldn't be done. Everything we enjoy today, everything we have, is a very fragile and a very finely balanced ecosystem of interactions and things. It doesn't take much to knock it over. It doesn't take much to throw us back to the Dark Ages. A lot of TV shows, books, movies, and so forth have dealt with this. What would happen if electricity went out, if an EMP struck? What happened? If this went, if that went? Well, the answer is we would go right back to the Stone Age. Very few of us would be able to survive in the first place, and the ones that did and could might not necessarily be the people that know it all. But even if you did know it all, survival considerations would come first, and you would have to just survive and forget higher learning. Forget all about nanotech and biogenetic DNA manipulation, CRISPR and things like that. That just wouldn't be on the agenda. It's like, what's for dinner? That's what's on the agenda, right? And if you go right back to the Stone Age, it'll be your neighbor that's for dinner. So it's a very different kind of conversation scenario that we're having. But you're right, though. In 800 years, Dave just messaged me privately, the Hoover Dam would simply not be there, right? And if you look at the power of the glaciers, the glaciation dams was all across Europe and Northern America and so forth, it would all shear it away. Like whatever was there would just be sheared away. It would just be gone. And the things that went before us, gone. And I find it astounding, Dave, that we are so laissez-faire, so what's the best word? Cavalier with our attitude towards science and knowledge and learning. In school, I'm pretty sure that's true, because my daughter just started kindergarten, right? And I will see it firsthand, I'm sure. There's just not much stock put in actually learning things and working things out. It just isn't there. And there's another interesting scenario or a thought that he raised, Dave, that is here in the private chat. A liquefied stone. The answer is yes. There's a story of a major or colonel rather, Fawcett. Fawcett was an explorer, a South American, but he explored Brazil, the Amazon, and so forth. He was lost on one of his expeditions in the 1930s, and he has a story where he ran across a field, and he was wearing spurs, and this is in South America somewhere in the Amazon, and when he had made it across the field, his spurs had actually melted off. So whatever plants he had run through, they had melted away his metal or steel, whatever they were, iron spurs. There's another observation he had made that there's certain birds that, well, I guess they built their nest into a rock wall. So they burrow into the rock wall with their beak. You know, they're making a hole. Yeah, but what he observed is they rub the rock with a certain leaf of a certain plant before they do that. Right? There was this observation. Now, good luck trying to find any reference to that. I read it in Charles Berlitz's books, right? So, but trying to find another reference to it is almost impossible. Maybe Fawcett's own writings, which I haven't been able to uncover yet. But so there are plants that seem, I guess, they seem to allow us to liquefy or make stone malleable. I mean, we talked about sound technology, Dave. You know,
yeah,
like it's not. Where Buddhist monks in Tibet had been observed to levitate very large stones simply by the use of their instrument, instruments which are playing at a hyperbolically shaped bowl, if you will, you know, like sort of like a half bowl, and the sound is amplified and lifts the rock up the cliff face, which was reported by certain travelers at the turn of the century, not the last century, the century before, from the 19th to the 20th century. So there's a whole bunch of stuff we just don't know about. It is too vast a difference in thinking, I think, as well. And we always whenever we can't define something, Dave, whenever we find something in an archaeological dig, it's always religious. It's some kind of cult object. It's a god thing, whatever. You know, that's
place
what they
of worship.
Place of worship, the batteries of Baghdad, that's how they were classified. Initially, a cult object, the mechanism of Antikythera, until we X-rayed it.
Yeah.
I believe very strongly that our technology is not advanced enough yet to recognize all the technology around us that has survived, more or less, I guess, from the previous civilizations. We are simply not advanced enough to recognize it. And I think the biggest thing that we are missing, which is in plain sight, is the moon. I know we're going well off the path here now. Welcome to the shiny side up.
That's right.
But it is the moon that is, in my opinion, the largest artifact that I can see in the solar system. There might be others. I mean, I don't know, but the moon certainly, from all the information that we have at this point, and I do urge you to read the book, Who Built the Moon? I've got it on the shelf here behind me, so I don't want to waste your time looking for it. But it's called Who Built the Moon? And if you have not read it, I urge you to go to your library, or maybe you want to go buy it. It's also good. It is a compilation of very strange facts, not assumptions or theories or made up things, but facts about the moon, which we've done it in the show. We've done a show cycle on it, which are very interesting, very thought provoking. But look, I think we need to educate our children better. I really believe that with education you can forestall prejudice. you can ignite the fire of inquisition, the fire of I guess the joy of learning, right? The curiosity, right? A burning curiosity, hopefully, in children to learn more, to know more, to advance us. Like I said before, okay, 2,500 years ago, less than 1 billion people, right? But you had intellectual giants, right, in the world. Where are they today? We have them, but there's now 7.5 billion of us. We don't have several. We don't. At least I don't see them. Maybe we have them locked up in the black budget programs, which we're going to talk about in the second part of the show. Nice segue, right? Now, but look, it's possible that people are identified early. Maybe, and that's part of the. Everybody wants to do intelligence tests because everybody really wants to know about themselves. And online, they used to be free for a long time. You can still do them online, right? They only tell you what the end result is if you pay them. But you take the entire test, right? And then they will send you the result if you pay them. But they already have the data thereafter. So whether or not you pay for it is completely irrelevant to them anyway. So it's very interesting. Go on.
But I've got something to add to that, and that was I saw a recent story, a news story about one of the genealogy sites where you can be invited to, well, you can volunteer yourself for a DNA test. That the one of, I don't know which one it is. I'm going to guess it's one of the three-letter agencies purchased that information from that website. They purchased the DNA results from that website. Now that is like our government, Australian government, purchasing the Facebook records of all of its inhabitants. I wanted to take it somewhere else, but that's where I ended up. There was another story, Mickey, the last one, which was I need to get I don't know where to get it stamped, my card, for my end of the world card. I don't know where to get it stamped because NASA once again warned that there was a giant asteroid headed for Earth this weekend and we're all going to die, but it didn't happen. We didn't die. So we survived yet another end of the world scenario.
Nice. And those are the only ones we know about, right? So
yeah.
There's another story I need to share. I think I've shared it before, but I need to share it again because I had coffee with a person that told me, and I don't know if I've shared it on air. He told me before, but he told me again this week when I had coffee with him. I used to work with him. I trust him. There's no reason. He doesn't know that I have a radio show. I told him afterwards. And he goes, "Oh, really?" So I sent him the link, but he had no idea where my interests lay. And we were just talking, spitballing over coffee, some work stuff, and then we just started talking privately about things. And he started talking about things that I'm interested in. Little was that known to him, though, and he started talking about 9/11. There was some monetization if we ever get that back. But essentially, one of his friends, one of his close friends. Now, this is like not from the person that it happened to, but this is, I guess, one degree of separation here. So his friend works in a capacity that allows him to be near people that are quite powerful. So clearly you can imagine it's in some kind of serving capacity, right? Mm-hmm. Which it is. And usually, interestingly enough, or at least that's been my experience, the really rich, the really powerful, they ignore the serving staff, servants or such, and pretty much treat them like furniture, which is great for the people that want to overhear things or don't want to get any further trouble than they have, because clearly they're not even looked at as human beings or equals by any stretch of the imagination. So there's this person who we can all safely assume is a serving person of some kind, and this is a few weeks prior to the event of September the 11th. In a place that requires servers, people that serve food and such, and he overhears
a conversation.
Greenspan, yeah, and not Greenspan. Sorry, not Greenspan. Who? Larry Silverstein. Sorry, Silverstein.
Yeah.
Who was in fact who was the owner of that place where everybody was. So the rich. He was there with his friends, talking about having taken out insurance on the towers, $1 billion each in case of terrorism attack. It pays out twice as much, and saying, "Don't worry." Things to the effect, "I'll get my money back soon enough." He's talking about the premiums, which would have been very steep, right? Obviously. But he says, "No, don't worry, guys. I'll get my money back soon enough." And then the same location, this gentleman, the server, is working again. This is after the event. And they're all, congratulating themselves how well it all went. It all went like clockwork, just like we planned it. So this is a person that overheard Silverstein and others talk about the event prior and then afterwards. And I guess they were celebrating there, because I think in the end he got like $4 billion or some crazy amount. Because like I said, he insured every tower for $1 billion, and then it would double in case of a terrorist attack. And then there was a court dispute. I'm not sure what the outcome was, but clearly a few weeks after the event, they were all celebrating, thinking, they had the money in the bank. So this is a fact. I'm not making this up. There's no reason why the person I had coffee with would make it up, right? So if there are any doubters out there, And I'm sure they are. That's okay. It's cool. I get it. I urge you to understand that the people in power, these are not the ultimate power brokers by any stretch of the imagination. These are the underlings, right? These are the people that don't have the keys to the executive bathroom, okay? But they know it exists. They know that it's there, right? So most of us don't know there's an executive bathroom. At least those guys know there is one there. And and it is really the unseen, the invisible ones that pull it all along. And there's only a few of those, and it's not the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds are an echelon above the Silversteins, certainly, but they're not the ultimate power brokers either. Unless there's a layer that's completely obscured from us. So, go on.
I was going to say, and I didn't say anything, but I'll say it. If 9/11 was organized by anybody other than terrorists, I would be sure that a conversation would have taken place where they were, and I've said this before on air anyway, but I would be sure that if it was an organized event and not by terrorists, that there would have been a conversation with Silverstein about, can we use your buildings? And he'd go, sure, as long as, I get my money, as long as I get my insurance payout, as long as it could be declared a terrorist event or whatever, right? Whatever you're planning. Sure, why not? You know what I mean?
Well, that's it, though.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that he would surely be on board.
Of course. Not only that, it wasn't just Silverstein that profited tremendously. I mean, it's like winning the lottery every day of your life. That's how he feels, right? Every day he wins the lottery. The amount of people, organizations, and interest groups that benefited from the event of that particular day is legion. I mean, I will actually do that for some of the next shows. I will list everything that there was a positive outcome for all the power brokers, right? The invasion of Afghanistan, the introduction of homeland security, the new powers, the law changes, the never-ending war. I mean, it goes on, right? And anybody who says anything against the government is now deemed unpatriotic, terrorist at worst. The law changes that went along with it, being held without cause for as long as they like, right? Even if you're a U.S. citizen protected by the Constitution, you ain't anymore. You're not protected by the Constitution. If someone just breathes the word terrorism in your direction, that's it. You're done, right? You're done.
Remember, there's a thing now. You're deplatforming.
Yeah, there's that. There's that as well, right? And interestingly enough, that's happened to us here, to some extent, and in the past, losing some shows that are irreplaceable because the people we interviewed are no longer with us.
That's right.
That is still a thorn in my side, but it is what it is, and we have to move on and live with that.
But Mackie, this is, instead of the government themselves telling us we can't say this, it's corporations that are saying that we can't have free speech.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And the government's not standing up for anybody.
No. And in fact, this is where it gets really interesting and complicated. I know we only have a couple of minutes left before the top of the hour.
Absolutely.
So the government and the corporations and the power brokers, the money people, there really is no longer a distinguishing line. And I think the administration of George Bush, George W. Bush Jr. Is probably the best administration to view as a showcase for that, right? And I think Strom Thurmond, one of the senators, he might no longer be with us, but he said that particular government or administration was the worst form of cash and carry government that the United States had ever seen. He said that some years ago, obviously when Bush was in power. But the point is that most of the administration then, was pretty much from the corporations. There had been CEOs and CFOs or Washington power brokers for a long time. And it's really hard to figure out these days where one begins and the other one ends. And I don't mean this in a facetious way at all. I'm being very serious. It is hard to tell where large corporations begin and government stops. There's so much interplay that it's hard to tell what's what and who is who anymore, right? And these people, none of them actually care at all about serving the people. If you do care about serving the people, this is my opinion, and I'm happy to be proven wrong. I reckon if you are this goes for pretty much any government anywhere in the world, in my opinion. Not everywhere, but mostly everywhere. You will be weeded out really quickly. Mm-hmm. You will be weeded out really quickly because it is not about serving the people. Sure, some of the stuff will benefit the people, and there's the music. All right, don't go away, guys. Donate if you can, please. This is Mr. Funded Radio.
We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
I think, and we're back, and we're talking about, or we're going to talk about black budgets, which would be really nice. A nice segue from the earlier discussions we had. Just bear in mind, though, just before I let go of what we just spoke of before, we are not dealing with people that have our best interests at heart. This is no longer. I mean, for most of the world, it never was. In America, there was this dream that government was by the people, for the people. You know, that's nice. It's nice. It's a nice thought. It's not. It isn't. People that go into politics, into power, and you don't even have to be in politics to be in power these days. You're just a corporate power broker, as it were. It is really, really important to understand that we are not at all important on top of any agenda. Our well-being is completely irrelevant. And at that point, I think if people realize this, they will understand this. I hope. Because people will, this is what we're going to talk about, this black budget thing here, this high strangeness we do for the next 12 months on the show. Once you understand where you sit, a lot of things will become easier to understand and believe because you have gotten rid of your preconceived notions. Okay? People say to me, oh, the government would never do this, the government would never do that. And the government is this abstract entity. You know, it's like a godlike, it's probably the wrong thing. But God is abstract as well in many ways, right? I mean, some people have a very personal relationship to God, but mostly when you say God, it's like an abstract concept. Government falls into the same kind of category. It's abstract. What's government, really? What is government? I mean, the president, the prime minister, the chief minister. Who is it? Or is it the cabinet? Is it the bureaucracy?
Congress, in your case?
Yeah, is it that? Is it? See, the thing is, the government is all of that, including you, including the laws that were written to support it. If there's Constitution or Bill of Rights or something similar, that's really what government is all about. It's you. As well, every single person who is franchised within the government by their vote. Your vote, right? If you exercise it or not, it doesn't matter. Well, it matters greatly, but whether or not you exercise it, you have a franchised interest in your nation, country, government, right? You are theoretically in charge of putting people into government. They're meant to work for you. That is, of course, no longer the case. Most of us don't understand the government. They don't understand how it works or why we vote or who we even vote for. There's no distinction between most parties anymore either. And it doesn't seem to make a difference anyway. It doesn't matter who is in power, be it a person or a party. In Australia, it's really bad because you vote for the party, so the figurehead can go real quick, as we've learned over the last few years. Right? It's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous. But even in the States or other countries, in Venezuela, there are two presidents today. Two parliaments as well. You ask yourself, how does that happen? It's just insanity, right? But nonetheless, there it is. And it's really important to understand, unless we take power ourselves and we take matters into our own hands, it'll stay like this. Because there's no impetus for the system to change. The system is completely self-perpetuating. That's the only agenda item it has. Perpetuate where it is. Maintain the status quo. If possible, make it better for the people in charge and worse for the people that are not. But other than that, maintain the status quo.
Mickey, I recently heard our own Prime Minister talking about, and actually no, it was the Treasurer. I heard the Treasurer talking about, and when questioned about money and politics, and I think it was Lee Sales asked, because she's really hard on them, to be honest, on any of the current governments we have, and she said, the people are asking, would it be a good idea to cease donations with the government? And he nearly had a coronary.
Yeah.
He was unable to form a sentence after being confronted with that statement, and it was hilarious, I have to say, to watch him attempt to put some kind of context into why it should continue the way it is, right? Because he said, "Oh, you wouldn't want the taxpayers." Because the first thing is, you wouldn't want the taxpayers to have to foot the bill. Well, their bill wouldn't be this massive thing. And she said, "Well, surely," Lisa is awesome. She said, "Surely, you donate, $250,000 to the party, and you want something in return." Oh, no, we have there's processes. He didn't say no. He just said, "Oh, there's processes."
The process, you donate $250,000 and you can have whatever you like.
Whatever you want, it's all good.
It's like it to go.
Would you like fries with that? And look, this was quite an astounding interview with, and I don't personally like or dislike the fellow, because I think it's a democracy and you shouldn't complain the hell out of it. Just use your feet and use your brain and set up for next time. Make sure you voice your opinion, right? In the democracy. Anyway, so that had me going all day. I kept recalling his facial expression. He honestly, nearly here, I think he had apoplexy. He was unable to speak, man. I'll tell you, the funniest thing I've ever seen. So this, and I've with the Greens member for Byron Bay, I spoke to them about it, and they agreed with there shouldn't be, but there is. So what do we do? I asked. Or you would have to be in power enough and have enough power to be able to regulate it and cut it down and dismiss it. In Australia, we're having the Banking Royal Commission findings now, and the government said, "Oh, we're not going to do all of those things. Where all the findings, some of them, right, but not all of them. We can't put all of their findings in place." And I'm thinking, well, the only reason you'd say that is if the bank had their hand up inside you, like you Kermit the Frog.
Yeah.
Although, if you believe Kermit the Frog is real, I'm so sorry for that. Maybe a sock puppet, right? So if our politicians are sock puppets to those people, big banks, big pharma, big coal, all those people who are really heavy donators towards the political party, you've got to really worry about that. What are they getting for it? The government should be saying, well, that Royal Commission, it cost us a couple of $1 million, maybe $100 million to come up with these findings. We should put those in place so this doesn't happen again. We should adopt all of those findings. But no, they're questioning it. I said, I'm thinking, who are you to question that, the jobs for the boys that they had in place for the Royal Commission?
Yeah.
Who are they? You didn't even know. Do I declare that you're smarter than that entire commission of people that did that research? No, I don't declare you are. So why would you say no? Anyway, I'll leave that alone.
No, but it's a very important point though, and this is where conspiracy theory and conspiracy fact are going hand in hand. So people, have a whole bunch of conspiracy theories about a whole bunch of stuff. But at some point you will stumble upon conspiracy fact, where conspiracy is so blatant that conspiracy just means collaboration of people toward a goal. That's what it is. Right. That's a conspiracy. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's all it is. That's what it means. And I know we talk about it like it's some crazy word, in the English language. It's not. It's a very simple meaning. And like I said this before, if you were rich and you had power, what would you do? You would ensure that you stay rich and powerful. That's what you would do. That's what you spend.
Damn
you spend a whole bunch of your time on that, right? You invest some good time into that because
I'd employ some people to do it for me.
Right, that makes sense. Now, anything else is just stupid. Anything else is a conspiracy theory, a crazy conspiracy theory, right? Oh yeah, people just have your best interest at heart. Yeah, sure they do. That's true. Yeah, that's why you lock your door every night, right? Because you can trust everybody. No, you can't trust people anymore. I don't think.
Mackie, in America, Pelosi and Obama and all of everyone else who's come into any kind of fame through politics has installed a massive fenced, gated area for themselves to comfortably live, right? And the biggest argument that they can come up with, which also serves to provide the same evidence for having a wall around the US, and that is that you build the wall because you love the people in that space, right? You're protecting your loved ones from everyone else. Now, if it was a free love 1960s hippie environment where people putting flowers in guns barrels, right? Would you build the wall? Probably not. Would those people with those big houses build the wall? What are they doing that they need to have that much protection? And from whom are they protecting themselves? That's the big question. So, granted, and I like that the opposition to Trump's wall is in such a state where they can't even defend the use of their own walls and their own properties without losing to the argument of building a wall in the first place. But what I want to see is a wall that is so big that it's Hollywood CGI big. Right? If you're going to build a wall, remember, live by the wall, die by the wall. Could you imagine, maybe just for 1 second, the moment the wall, and it's a big wall too, I'm talking in my imagination, right? It's sort of like Hunger Games big, right? This thing's massive. You can't get through it. It would take a team of 100 people to climb on top of each other to get over it, right? Just imagine that kind of wall. And it's not just up, it's down, and you can't dig under it. So the moment that wall was finished, could you imagine if there was such a catastrophe within the US that people couldn't escape it?
Yeah, that'd be funny.
It's like hiding in a tunnel. Yeah. You live by the tunnel, die by the tunnel, or an underground bunker or whatever, right? You still have your own problems.
You have to ask yourself, is the wall there to keep people out or keep people in, right? That's always the question about the wall. And that's really the question of the panopticon as well. Is it there to keep you in, or is it there to keep someone out? It's a self-imposed prison. In America, to some extent, is doing that at the moment, right? There's a policy of isolation or isolationism, which is fine. It's fine. Alrighty.
That's now we know why that's set to strengthen themselves.
Yes.
All right. And yeah, I get that. So your segue and my segue is
now. Yeah, go.
No, I lined it up for you.
Oh, thank you, sir. So we've been speaking about the black budgets for quite some time, and this is the money that governments tell you they're not going to tell you about, right? That's the money they say that's the money we're using for stuff you do not need to know about. But I'm starting here on. Yeah, I know, right? I'm starting on page 12 here, Dave. I think this is the best entry.
Classified.
No, on July 16, 2001, July 16, 2001, in front of the House Appropriations Committee, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld stated the following: "The financial systems of the Department of Defense are so snarled up that we can't account for some $2.6 trillion in transactions that exist, if that's believable." Now, that's what he said. And we don't really hear about black budget programs, right? Or about people who have actually looked into them, right? However, the topic was discussed in 2010 by Washington Post journalists Dana Priest and William Arkin. So this is the money that they may not tell you about. So the $2.6 trillion, I'm not saying all of it was spent on not even I think we call them ultra black projects, right, or non-existent projects. But I'm saying that a large amount probably was. Now, their investigation lasted approximately 2 years and concluded that America's classified world has become so large, so unwieldy, and so secretive that no one knows how much money it costs, how many people it employs, how many programs exist within it, or exactly how many agencies do the same work. Another person was aviation journalist Bill Sweetman. Within the Pentagon, he estimated that approximately 150 special access programs existed that weren't even acknowledged. These programs are not known about by the highest members of government and the highest ranking officials in the military. He determined that most of these programs were dominated by private contractors such as Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and so forth. And they had no idea as to how these programs were funded. Dwight D. Eisenhower, former 5-star U.S. general, that's the highest possible ranking within the military, and President of the United States, also warned us about secrecy and the acquisition of unwarranted influence within the Department of Defense with his farewell speech. This is what he said. In the Council of Government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential disaster of the rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. He further warns us about the influence of the military-industrial complex and the influence and power it's capable of. After Eisenhower, the next and only other president that blew the whistle on secrecy beyond the government was President John F. Kennedy, and we all know what happened to him in one of his most famous speeches. He's also referring to the military-industrial complex. This is what he said. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. Do you remember that?
Yep.
And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweigh the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there's little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there's little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there's very grave danger that an unannounced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit. This is Kennedy speaking still. To the extent that it is in my control. We are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence. On infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is the system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditures questioned, no rumors printed, no secret is revealed. So that's what he said. The amount that the US sets aside for sensitive operations each year is not allowed to be published for eyes outside the intelligence community. We are in an age where the US is having a difficult time keeping sensitive information under wraps. And although there's an abundance of blatant information for the world to wake up to, that which is still kept under tight wraps has also become more transparent. Many phenomena previously labeled as merely a conspiracy theory are now surfacing as true and verifiable day after day. Dave?
Could some of these black budget programs be dealing with UFOs? There is a large amount of evidence to suggest that they do, and possibly even extraterrestrials. Documents from the NSA prove that UFOs and extraterrestrials are of high interest to the agency. And I'm just going to do a quick comment here. Why would the NSA at all be looking into them if they weren't real? Straight up. So think about that. In fact, I would like to mention, this is the author, that there is an overwhelming amount of evidence to suggest that these black budget programs deal with the matters beyond our world. First off the list here is Gary McKinnon. I've actually made attempts to have him on the show. Gary McKinnon has also shed light on this fact, as have thousands of previously classified documents and statements from high-level government and military personnel. The world within our world must be quite fascinating. The fact that we are living in the time of transparency must mean that the truth cannot stay hidden forever. And there's an excerpt from the book AD After Disclosure, written by Richard Dolan and Bryce Zabel. By now, the classified world has moved far beyond the reach of the public world and far beyond in its power and capabilities. Consider the story of a former NSA scientist who spoke with the authors. According to this individual, the NSA was operating computers during the mid-1960s with a processing clock speed of roughly 650 megahertz. To put that into perspective, it took 35 years for personal computers in the consumer market to reach that speed. Indeed, in 1965, there was no personal computers at all. Immediately, the near-fatal Apollo 13 mission in 1971 came to mind, with its reliance on slide rulers by mission specialists to guide the damaged NSA spacecraft back to Earth. When presented with this image, the NSA scientists shrugged and stated that secret computational capabilities were too important to share with NASA. So in computing, the National Security Agency was an amazing 35 years ahead of the rest of the world. This leads one to wonder what its computational powers are today. Another example was the US airstrike against Libya in 1986. The raid employed F-111s, F-111s, fighter aircraft. Left out of the mission, however, was the F-117A, the Nighthawk. Nice reference to you there in the chat room, Nighthawk. Better known as the stealth fighter, it had been operational since 1983, but was still classified in 1986. In a form of logic both perverse and rational, the F-117A was so radically advanced that keeping it secret was more important than using it for the military mission. Isn't that crazy? Given the mixture of treasure chest of government money and private connections, the likelihood exists that 6 decades later there is a clandestine group that possesses, and there's 4 points, technology that is vastly superior to that of the mainstream world, the ability to explore areas of our world and surroundings presently unavailable to the rest of us, scientific and cosmological understandings that give them greater insights into the nature of our world, and a significant built off-the-grid infrastructure, particularly underground, that affords them a high degree of secrecy and independence of action. This might well qualify them as a separate civilization, one that has broken away from our own, in effect a breakaway civilization. Still interacting with our own, its members probably move back and forth between the official reality of what we are supposed to believe and the other reality which encompasses new truths and challenges. Think about Men in Black, for instance. You know, you live in a real house, but then you're working with aliens in your job. Or if you work at the skunk works and you go back and, you know, to home in the real world and back again to skunk works. You have to think about how that really is. Now, thinking that the F-117A was developed and it was only released publicly, you know, in knowledge and officially recognized 25 years after, and the Blackbird was only acknowledged 25 years after its retirement, where during its service 25 years prior it had flown 1,500 missions. So we're talking about what have they got today is the question. that I raise. I know Meki and I have spoken about this 100 times, and I remember one documentary that I saw, which they had a military official talking about the purchase of a new helicopter, and he said, this helicopter will be the last one we buy, the next one will be anti-gravity. And that's just truly amazing. That kind of thinking today, maybe, and Meki and I have brought this out on the show, and we talk about this often also, is that maybe anti-gravity was there back in the 20s. Maybe the fight, maybe some global fight has been over this second level of technology. And it really does bring to mind all of the world conflicts. And Meki, I'd once thought that the Iraq War was only about inhabiting that space for the return, because that's where Samaria was in Iraq. Maybe the Anunnaki had flown back. Maybe they were there and tried to intercept them. Maybe they couldn't have the Iraqis talking to the Anunnaki. They go, what on earth happened there? Right? You have to think about that. Meki, back to you in the studio. Maybe Meki's gone offline.
No, Meki's here. Sorry, mate. I was respectfully muted. You're right though. The Middle East, specifically the Levant, the area of what comprised the Sumerian and then Babylonian civilizations, is of high interest to most of us, obviously, in this particular field, because of the history it holds and the information it has transmitted to us. And I believe that, yes, it's possible. What you said is possible. I think it's also possible that they were looking for artifacts and still are looking for artifacts in that area. But interestingly enough, the next article was published by Gaia staff on December 20th, 2017, just a little over a year ago. And it's entitled Pentagon UFO Program Shows Clandestine Government Investigation. The recent revelation of a clandestine government program funded to study UFO phenomena has come to a surprise to many. As reported in the New York Times and Politico, a black budget operation was created to look into a multitude of reports detailing military and civilian encounters. This Pentagon UFO program ran from 2008 to 2012 at the request of then Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, in search of a definitive answer to the phenomenon. The Pentagon's black budget. The US government spends a large portion of its budget on defense. In fact, about half of discretionary spending, amounting to over $500 billion, goes to Defense Department programs, funding operations at the CIA, NSA, Justice Department, and several other agencies. Other government agency, OGA, what are you? Who are you waiting for? OGA, other government agency. Of that money, over $50 billion is spent in covert operations, undisclosed to the public. Before this elusive allocation was exposed by Edward Snowden, the majority of this money was being used for surreptitious data collection programs used ostensibly for counter-terrorist measures. Though it's likely that nothing has changed in that regard, the latest leak to come from this budget details a 5-year program that may or may not be ongoing, which earmarked $22 million for the study. The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or AATIP, was funded at the behest of Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid between 2007 and 2012, as we said. Reid, along with fellow congressional members Ted Stevens and Daniel Inouye, allocated the money for Bigelow Aerospace, a private contractor working with NASA, funded by billionaire hotel magnate Robert Bigelow. The program involved a small group of government employees at the Defense Department working in conjunction with Bigelow to study first-hand experiences by military servicemen, civilian experiences, and a trove of metal alloys recovered from the UFOs in question. Okay, so just pause here for a second. A trove of metal alloys recovered from the UFOs in question. Hello? Okay, let's get back to the text. Based on the testimony of former intelligence official Luis Elizondo, the program picked up where Project Blue Book left off in the late 60s. You all know about Blue Book, right? When it concluded that most UFO phenomena could be written off as having a mundane explanation. despite over 700 sightings that remained officially unexplained. Weather balloon, Venus, swamp gas, low-flying geese, all that stuff, right? Revelatory reports surfaced this past weekend, we're talking about December 2017, in the New York Times and Politico, sparking subsequent stories across nearly every mainstream media outlet. The expose came as the first major announcement to the STARS Academy, a consortium of former high-level government employees and aerospace engineers working with former rock star Tom DeLonge to investigate the UFO phenomenon. Dave?
Yes, exactly. I've got to find where we are. There we go. UFO sightings and the expected response. Several videos accompanied the reporting this past weekend when this story was written, showing spacecraft that elicited shocked responses from highly trained naval commanders. These the videos were taken by pilots of the F-18F Super Hornets who encountered spacecraft seeming to defy the laws of physics. Remember that spacecraft, you mean just craft in the atmosphere, their origin is unknown, unless it was known that they are spacecraft or came from space. These craft did not show signs of traditional jet propulsion or wings and fluid speeds never seen before, and we could classify that as having non-traditional flight characteristics. Another article appeared in the Times the same day, which detailed the experiences of two pilots, Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate, who were flying reconnaissance missions off the coast of San Diego from the USS Princeton. The Princeton had been tracking these mysterious craft for a few weeks before their encounter that day in 2004. While on a routine mission, the two were told about a real-world vector at 80,000 feet. When they approached the UFO, it dropped out of sight before they realized it was hovering 50 feet above the ocean, creating some sort of disturbance in the water. That means it's physical. When the pilots attempted to reach the object again, it shot off. Fravor and Slate then began their return to a rendezvous point 60 miles away, before the operations officer on board the Princeton notified them that the UFO was already hovering there. The object was gone by the time they returned, and no one was able to explain what it was. Aside from the video released by the DoD, there is no other record or explanation of what the object was. When the pilots returned to the Princeton, they were teased by their shipmates for having seen UFOs, an unsurprising reaction that is part of our systemic stigmatization when it comes to reporting such experiences. Seth Shostak, senior astronomer for the SETI Institute at UC Berkeley, criticized the program for allowing Bigelow to direct its efforts. He criticized the billionaire for his long-held belief that we have been visited by extraterrestrials. Shostak himself is in charge of a program searching for extraterrestrial intelligence in the universe. He also criticized the program for its use of $22 million in taxpayer money that didn't come up with anything, despite the video evidence and reams of paperwork, according to the report by Politico. Aside from the fact that $22 million is relatively insignificant in a $52 billion budget of undisclosed money otherwise going toward weapon and surveillance, it's strange that Shostak would be so quick to shoot down a project, like the pun, that has the same goals as his. Those $22 million spent over the course of the program would amount to about a penny per year for individual American taxpayers. Shostak's sentiment may seem to some as perpetuating the stigma that prevents those who have had UFO experiences or bizarre encounters from talking about them. Bigelow, in the New York Times interview, mentions this, stating he believes the US perpetuates a culture of stigmatization in which a juvenile taboo keeps scientists from speaking out for fear of being criticized or ostracized. Though Shostak and other skeptics criticize Bigelow for his eccentric views and lack of scientific background, Bigelow's aerospace is currently contracted with NASA, having successfully inflated its Novell beam module in the ISS. Working in conjunction with NASA and SpaceX merits some credit for a company that is receiving funding to study UFO phenomena, especially if it could potentially be considered a threat to security. And that was the reason why Senator Reid and his compatriots were awarded the money in the first place. Though virtually all of the military servicemen who experienced the phenomenon claimed that the UFOs did not appear to pose a threat. It's unclear whether the Pentagon is continuing to fund the AATIP, but Elizondo says he had a successor and believed it to remain in existence to this day. Whether the recent media hype will encourage the government to look deeper into its phenomenon remains to be seen. Meanwhile, to the Star Academy promises to continue publicizing its findings. I'm just going to, I have to say at the outset, I think the publishing that those videos was intentional, and I think it was maybe able to deepen the pockets of those funding the other programs. And we've seen a continuous increase of black budget funding, and it's quite possible that that is what it's all about, people. Mackie? Muty?
No, look, that's look, it's fascinating to get the information, because the thing is this, okay? I mean, you can dismiss it, right? But nonetheless, here it is. There's $22 million which was spent on something, right? And there is physical evidence. There's video evidence. There's testimonials, and you can interpret that at the end of the day any which way you like, right? But facts are facts, and we have physical evidence. And there's a great campaign of denial when it comes to things like this. Okay, people are complicit, because if you were to acknowledge the existence of these phenomena, it would really hurt your world picture and the fundamental basis for your belief systems at life. And people don't like that. Now let's take a closer look at the black budget, $52.6 billion. The US black budget spans over a dozen agencies that make up the National Intelligence Program, right? And the CIA, NSA, and National Reconnaissance Office program budget has grown over 100% since 2004. The top 5 agencies by spending are the CIA, right? They're sitting in 2000. So this report is from 2013, I should say, at $14.7 billion in 2013, which was a growth of 56% from 2004. The National Security Agency, the NSA, set at $10.8 billion, and there was a 53% growth in those 9 years. And the National Reconnaissance Office also set at $10.3 billion. That's a 12% growth in the same time frame. The National Geospatial Intelligence Program, which you probably never heard of in your life. And what they do is they generate and provide imagery and map-based intelligence, which is used for national security. U.S. military operations, navigation, and humanitarian aid efforts grew from 3 to $4.9 billion. Sorry, just under 3, I should say. Just under $3 billion. And there was a 108% increase in that budget overall. Then there's the General Defense Intelligence Program, which you might not have heard about either, and they're sitting at $4.4 billion. And they provide assessments for foreign military intentions and capabilities to policymakers and military commanders. They conduct human and technical intelligence collection, document, and media management. Okay, so those are the main ones. And there are 4 main spending categories for this. The top secret spending can be divided into 4 main categories: data collection, data analysis, management, facilities and support, and data processing and exploitation. The CIA and NRO are heavy on data collection, while the NSA and the NGP focus on data processing and exploitation, as well as auxiliary functions like management facilities and support. And it's funding 5 mission objectives, 20.1 billion. That goes to warning US leaders about critical events. It's meant to warn policymakers, military and civilian authorities of threats such as economic instability, state failure, societal unrest, and the emergence of regional powers. 17.2 billion is dedicated, again, this was in 2013, to combat terrorism. It's used to monitor and disrupt violent extremists and suspected terrorist groups that plot to inflict harm to the US, its interests, and allies. 6.7 billion is used to stop the spread of illicit weapons and prevent the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. $4.3 billion is dedicated to conducting cyber operations, preventing cyber intrusions and proliferation of weapons of mass destruction yet again. And then finally, 3.8 billion is dedicated to defending against foreign espionage, which really means detecting attempts to, by adversaries to penetrate the U.S. government. 32 types of expenses are in there. Each agency has a unique breakdown of expenses to reflect the priorities of its mission. There's no specific entry for the CIA's fleet of armed drones in the budget summary, but a broad line item hints at the dimensions of the agency's expanded paramilitary role, providing more than $2.5 billion for covert action programs. And that's really the line item. $2.5 billion, the line item is covert action programs that would include drone operations in Pakistan, Yemen, payments to militias in Afghanistan and Africa, and attempts to sabotage Iran's nuclear program. There are 107,035 employees in the intelligence community. The CIA employs, there's 83,000 FTEs, full-time equivalents, and the CIA employs the most civilians, 21,000, almost 22,000. And there's a breakdown further of other numbers. The NSA employs 64% of all military personnel in the program, which is 14,000, and 21,800 full-time contractors. So there's a lot of people. There's 100,000, well, almost 110,000 people employed in the intelligence community. That's a lot of people. And I don't think any of them were on furlough when the government shut down, because the black budget is exactly that. You don't have to ask for it, you just get it. All right. This brings us to another interesting article, my friend, which is Barmer's USA Facts, Black Budget Projects and Tracking Unofficial Government Spending. Former
Microsoft CEO and current LA Clippers owner Steve Ballmer unveils USA Facts to report on government spending, drawing data exclusively from the US government. Steve Ballmer's philanthropic foray began with a conversation with his wife, and a platform to monitor government spending is what he came up with. However, USA Facts is limited by the timelines, availability, and consistency of data collected by government. In the ultra-secret realm of government spending, so-called black budgets, projects are almost never detailed. These projects may be included in the overall budget, but their names, details, and missions are all kept private from the public. In 2013, a Washington Post published an article with information provided by former intelligence contractor and whistleblower Edward Snowden that detailed the intelligence community's secret black budget. Some $52 billion was allocated to over a dozen agencies that made up the National Intelligence Program. Although the government has annually released its overall level of intelligence spending since 2007, it had not divulged how it used the money or how it performs against the goals set by the President and Congress. That's really funny, because they don't even know what's going on. The United States government in particular its intelligence agencies do not divulge how or where they spend their budget. If Barmer's USA Facts is to have any authority or relevancy in how the government actually spends its money, it faces the seemingly impossible task of penetrating the most upper levels of secrecy in a government that is highly compartmentalized. Black budget projects. Even as far back as 1987, the Pentagon's black budget projects were brought into light by journalist Tim Weiner of the Philadelphia Inquirer. In a sanitized article available on the CIA website, Weiner stated that by making $35 billion in defense programs invisible, the Pentagon is hurting national security. I can't even see how that's even possible. His report included to reveal that in the 1998 black budget, more than 40% of the $8.4 billion allocated to Air Force research and development of strategic nuclear programs was kept secret. Weiner further commented, if the few black budget projects we do know about are any indication, it has become a hiding place, not just for weapons and operations that should be secret, but for those that are poorly managed or conceived. Oh, that's an insult right there. There were more than 10,000 government compartments that worked independently of one another to keep Congress and the general public in the dark, according to Weiner. That's really funny. What a Freudian slip. What a name. Weiner. I should say Wiener. That was in the late 80s. Fast forward to September 10th, 2001, the day before, you know that day, 9/11, terrorist attacks that changed the future of defense spending forever, and Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld reveals our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track 2.3 trillion in transactions. Neki, take this one.
Crazy. Black budget funding. So far, we've been discussing the US government's allocations of taxpayer dollars into so-called black budget projects. But even then, we're not addressing how the government raises funding through other means. Illegal drug trafficking is reportedly a major source of income for government agencies such as the DEA and the CIA. I know, crazy, right? Colombia's most infamous drug lord, Pablo Escobar, and this is a quote here, worked for the CIA selling cocaine to finance the fight against communism in Central America, according to the slain Medellin cartel crime boss's own son. The drug business is very different than what we dreamed. What the CIA was doing was buying the means to get the drug into their country and getting a wonderful deal. That was written by Juan Pablo Escobar. Analyst Stephen Landman argues that CIA drug trafficking began in 1947 and that it continues today in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, South and Central America, and parts of the rest of the world, facilitating the global supply of illicit drugs. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Gary Webb reported in 1996 that a drug ring that sold millions of dollars worth of cocaine in Los Angeles was funneling its profits to the CIA's army in Nicaragua, known as the Contras. Webb met fierce criticism for his accusations that the CIA was behind the crack epidemic of the 1980s, and his 2004 death was ruled a suicide. Right?
Of course it was. That's so convenient, isn't it? USA Facts tracking government spending. One of the core aims of USA Facts is to answer where does the money come from and where is it spent? Whom does it serve? And most importantly, what are the outcomes? As a non-partisan, not-for-profit civic initiative without an apparent political agenda or commercial motive, USA Facts still has to rely solely on government data. However, just through the act of launching, USA Facts is achieving another one of its goals, and that is to spur serious, reasoned and informed debate on the purpose of functions of government. In this respect, Barmer has mine, and I sincerely commend his efforts towards bringing more transparency towards government spending. the part of USA Fact's methodology that stands out particularly to me is when it says, and I quote, "We have assembled this report consisting in unbiased government data so the American public can draw its own conclusions," unquote. Data in and of itself may be unbiased, but the organization that releases the data, the US government, is anything but.
So the question is, what kind of data do we get? And
Yeah.
it's really a question of integrity, ethics, morality, none of which mean anything to anyone in power. I do want to say something though, because we're getting to the end of the show. There's a few more minutes left, and I want to leave the rest until next week. The next week we're going to cover with you the question of whether or not the U.S. government is intentionally hiding $21 trillion in spending, and we're going to look at the debunkers around the $2.3 trillion. And I left that in here in toto. So the entire thing that I found on the website, which is called www.metabank.org, yeah, I've left here. There's nothing edited. We're gonna give it to you in total, and once we've shared it with you, right, you make up your own mind as to how, I don't know, factual, interesting, or how debunking it truly is. Now, very important. And this is, I guess, it's a new year. It's bills are hitting us. This is listener-funded radio, right? What does that mean? It means that none of the hosts, that's Dave and I and others, Solaris, get paid for this. This is completely free information we're giving you, and hopefully a bit of entertainment as well. We get, like I said, nothing for it. All the money that you donate to the station is going to run the station. Because, again, there are no corporate sponsors here, right? This is very important to understand. There's no agenda except for the agenda that is carried on by the hosts themselves. In our case, that agenda is to bring you as much information as we can. Do we have opinions? Yes, we do. They don't have to be your opinions, of course. The information that we give you is unbiased. When we tell you about our opinions, we will tell you that as well. So we always are very clear on what we share with you. And Dave and I are very clear in when we actually start giving our commentary to certain facts. That's really, really important, okay? Now, if you wanted to become involved with the station, maybe, come and subscribe, to the archives, become a regular listener, maybe you want to give a regular donation, that's all easy enough to do. It's revolution.radio. It's really cool. I like these new domain names, right? .radio. I think it's just brilliant. Anyway, it's revolution.radio. Okay, so you go ahead and go to the homepage. On the left-hand side of your screen, you will see a whole bunch of things like different menus, right? And a little bit down in the middle, it says, chat. It says other things as well. But above that, in the yellow radio button, it says donate. Yellow radio button, donate. Yeah, and it's easy enough to do. And it's really cool stuff because all the information is there. Not just our show, everybody else's show. Like I said, Solaris, who comes just before us, she has guests every week. Every single week she interviews. Okay, I think that's really good information. And like I said, hey, there are not very many news sources like this, Dave. I think out there's not a lot that goes on. You can listen to the corporate media, and like I said before, today, the vast majority of all media is owned by 6 corporations. 6. In the 70s, there were hundreds of different and independent owners of media. I'm talking about radio, I'm talking about television, I'm talking about newspapers, newsprint, right, which is sort of in decline, I guess, a little bit. But there were hundreds of different owners. Today, most of it, not all of it, but most of it is owned by 6 corporations. and the funny thing is, they don't even have to tell people what to say. You don't. There's a lot of self-censorship going on, right? Because you know what's good for your career. Come on, you know what's good for your career, right? So you get a whole bunch of non-news, not fake news.
You remember that well, they call themselves a journalist, an ex-journalist that was confronting us with that same question.
Yeah, yeah. This is it happened on Facebook. This is actually a gentleman I went to school with in Germany, in primary school, right? And we lost touch over years, like for probably 20, 25 years we lost touch, and we reconnected on Facebook. I had no idea what he did for a living. He doesn't know what I do, he doesn't know about the show. And we're just talking. And then we got talking about this. We got to talking about this, and I realized that he's actually, in fact, a journalist. And I said to him, well, doesn't it concern you that the all the or most of the media is now owned by six corporations? Whereas it used to be a fairly large ownership spectrum in the 70s, 50s, 60s, and certainly before that as well. He goes, no. And I said to him, so you don't think it's at all worrying that that the news could be influenced in any way by these? He goes, no, that wouldn't happen. And I said to him, but this, and this. So I gave him a couple of examples, and before I knew it, I was unfriended. So I haven't heard from him since. So it is a thing. I mean, like I said though, and I'm going to say it again. It is hard for people to accept that what they have believed all their lives might not in fact be so.
I'm not saying, Mackie, they live.
Right? They live. I mean, if you haven't seen that movie, go and watch it. Yeah?
He defended his position so fervently too.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Yeah, it was actually really great. When I watched it for the first time, I felt it was like taking a book out of the story of my life. They actually end up in a fist fight, right? And Roddy Piper is the protagonist in that particular movie, and so they're having a bit of a wrestling match, a bit of a fight, and it's all about putting on the glasses, and the glasses let you see reality, right? In black and white, simple world as it is. But anyway, look, there's the music.
We'll see you next week for another Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mackie. But coming up after the short commercial break is a roundtable with Jer Bear. Take part, be part of this.